It's right at 1 o'clock, and in the interest of respecting everybody's time, I'll go ahead and get started. I was hoping that Cindy was going to... Cindy here yet? I'm not seeing her. Oh, there's Carl. So we might have a couple other people, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if Cindy shows up and wants to say a word before we get really into it, then we'll do that. The first thing that I will let you know is that I have muted everyone. You're welcome to unmute yourself at any point if you have a question. You're also welcome to use the raise your hand feature, but that's a little hard the way that my computer is set up in terms of sharing a presentation with you. So it's probably best, and I will certainly not feel slighted if you just unmute yourself and speak up if you have a question. Just to let you know, I am recording this. We will, I think that the presbyteries will want to make this available for folks who have missed it. In general, if somebody has an objection to that, then you certainly don't have to register that now. You can let me know later, and we can probably go in and edit out any parts, especially if you have something less than kind to say about your session or something like that. I'll make sure that we only put the best bits forward. I'm seeing a couple more people registering at the last minute and coming in. So maybe I'll give it 30 more seconds. So the recording, I think that everybody has their names correct here. I was going to say that I normally encourage folks at the beginning of a webinar to make sure that your name is reflected so it doesn't say iPhone or something like that. But I think that we're in pretty good shape right now, and 16 of us. So I'm going to go ahead and start, mainly because the sooner that I can get started, the more opportunities we'll have for questions at the end. So I've probably got 30 to 45 minutes of content that I'm going to share. Feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have a question or if something's a little unclear. Don't hesitate to speak up. Again, I'll mute everybody before we really get into this. And then the remaining time is up to you all, and I'd love to answer questions that have either been burning in your minds before this webinar, or anything that I bring up that you'd like clarification on, or maybe to talk about in the context of your own ministry experience. I was saying earlier that I attended Bruce's, I actually watched the video of Bruce's webinar that Cindy organized a couple months ago, and also the Altar Live, and I just realized how many different questions there were, and just that I was hoping that there was a need that I could help with here. So with that said, I'll introduce myself. My name is Eric Doss, and I live in Lowell, Massachusetts. My wife is Heather Prince Doss, who's the pastor of the Elliott Presbyterian Church. And a lot of this comes out of my experience, at least started with my experience in running our worship services since, I guess, March 15th or so. My main work is as an organizational consultant. I work with an organization called Design Group International. We are process consultants, so we work with churches and organizations and businesses on lots of different organizational challenges, visioning, mission studies, things like that. My particular focus is in organizational health, and I think that the challenges of hybrid worship are really a point where organizational health and technology collide, and we've learned a lot, and we have a lot left to learn as we move forward into a future that looks very different, even as we get good news on the vaccine front. So some parts of this, some parts of what I'm going to talk about today are probably very useful right now while we're doing virtual church. I think that a lot of it is probably, when I look at how we moved from worshiping in person to virtual worship, we were kind of, I used the expression earlier that we were painting an airplane as we were trying to fly it. And what I hope is that with some guidance and some, asking questions and some time to reflect and plan excuse me, that the worship, the experience of moving into hybrid worship will be a little less fraught with challenges, and that we'll be able to think more about that. And so that's my hope for this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a screen share here. Somewhere, that's the slideshow, I believe. Minimize that. So feel free to interrupt me as you would like. So this is my introduction. I'm going to use, we're going to define some terms here. And the first one that I want to define is, here's our agenda, I guess. So we'll do a little introduction. We'll talk about some technical terminology. We'll do a discussion of some technology challenges, and then we'll talk a little bit about the best practices for hybrid worship as we move into that. So what is hybrid worship? There's a lot of ways to define this, but I think that what's really helpful is to think about it in terms of what you're doing for the people who are in your faith community. And I think that hybrid worship is really about removing the limitations that keep people from participating without regard to their, I'm going to chat here, without regard to their location. For so many years, being a member of our faith communities has meant that you have to be in the building. And I think that what the pandemic has really challenged us to do is think about the different ways that we can engage people if they're not in the building, if they're at home, if they're shopping. As somebody joined our church service a couple months ago from Home Depot as she was picking up some stuff for her work to do on Sunday. So I just think that there's a lot of opportunities that we're facing in terms of, a lot of opportunity that the pandemic has given us. There are now plenty of examples of folks who belong to a faith community that have never set foot inside of the sanctuary. Never been in the physical building. I think Bruce was talking about that they're having some of the first virtual, the first people who have only known their church through virtual worship joining sometime soon. So the world has changed. And even when it's possible for us to be back in the sanctuary, for everybody to be back in the sanctuary, hybrid worship allows people to continue to participate in the experience of your faith community without being there. So if you think about, families who have a soccer game and, can't make it from the soccer game home and get cleaned up and get to church on time, but they can join via Zoom or via some other format. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Just some technical terms that I want to discuss real quick because I throw them out there and I assume that everybody knows them. But I just want to be clear that we're on the same page. So I'll talk about HDMI. HDMI is the cord that you plug a camera or a camcorder into your computer or your monitor. You use it for DVD, Blu-ray connections, et cetera, et cetera. It's got a maximum of about 50 feet that it'll work. And the reason that I mention that is that as we're looking towards what our sanctuaries are going to have to look like from a physical, organization standpoint, it's important to think about these numbers. So HDMI, about 50 feet. There's ways to extend that, but it's not always flawless. SDI is a professional standard that allows you to have a camera up to 300 feet. And in some cases up to 1,000 feet, but I don't think that that's probably going to be necessary in any of our sanctuaries. But it allows much greater distance, but it's a professional standard. It's something that you have to kind of seek out. And then USB is what probably most people are using to connect their webcams to their computers. And you've got about 10 or 12 feet for that. So when we're talking about, and when you're reflecting as a session or as the leader of your community, when you're reflecting on how you're going to organize your physical space to make streaming and hybrid worship possible, it's important to think about these limitations. There's a couple of other options too, but those are the ones that I kind of throw out pretty easily. We'll probably talk about 3 kinds of cameras today. So a DSLR or a mirrorless camera is what you probably think of when you think of a professional camera, an interchangeable lens camera. I use those interchangeably, the DSLR or mirrorless. Those are technically 2 different things, but they look the same to most folks. A PTZ camera is a pan tilt zoom camera, and that really describes its function. So it's able to pan tilt and zoom. They look like little miniature R2-D2 robots, kind of a dome top. We'll see a picture of one in a minute. And then the webcam is probably what a lot of folks at least have been using. They're normally built into your laptops. It's also possible that you have one that clips on somewhere, normally connects to your computer via USB. And then just a clarification, when I say streaming, I mean live broadcasting. So, and I contrast that with pre-recording parts or all of your worship service and broadcasting them later. So some considerations that you have to make from a technical standpoint as we're moving forward is, number one, streaming versus recording. So you have to decide which is going to work best, and we'll talk about some of the pros and cons in just a minute. You need to decide on the platform. So I say Zoom, YouTube, Facebook. I think that some people are probably using other services similar to Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Skype, other things, but we can kind of use that interchangeably. You need to consider the camera quality. So what kind of experience you want people to have. And then you really need to think about your that camera quality and the quality overall of your whole service in terms of the kind of balance between the production quality and the ease of use. And finally, how do you involve the congregation as we move to a place where people might not all be in the same building? So the first one, streaming versus recording. And this is just a really brief overview. I have a friend who's she's the pastor of a church, and she lives on the church is located on an island off the coast of South Carolina, and they have really limited internet bandwidth. It is actually impossible for them to stream their service because if 100 members of her church are all online using the streaming service, the internet for the whole island slows down. So they're really unable to do that. And so what they end up having to do is record most of the sermon and publish it ahead of time. But streaming is happening live, so it allows interaction. We've noticed that in Zoom meetings or GoToMeeting or WebEx or whatever it is. There's a built-in function of community there because there's chat screens and you can see each other, when you put up the gallery view. One of the challenges for streaming, though, is that as we move back into sanctuaries, that there's going to be equipment needs. It is possible that you will need cameras and computers and monitors for more than just one person. If you're going to have soloists or choirs, gosh, choir seems like it's going to be so far off, but choirs and liturgists and pastors, there's more of a need for kind of multiple setups, multiple different equipment setups. And then it requires staff and volunteers. Most of these things you can't just hold a camcorder up in front of your face and hope that the live stream works well. So that's going to require recruiting staff and volunteers and also training them. If you're recording, it's possible, and just broadcasting, so recording ahead of time and then broadcasting, it's possible that you'll have higher production quality because there's more things that you can control. You can limit the changes in light, you can have better sound, you can work on stuff in post-processing. Decreased equipment needs because you can probably film it with one camera, one setup. But it does require editing, which is, if anybody's been doing that for their church, editing's a little harder than we all imagine. And there's some loss of community. I know that for churches who have chosen to do recordings, they end up with, they end up having folks, before or after some sort of coffee hour. Yeah, and so there's ways to create that community, but it's not built in. So are you alluding to the possibility of seeing the people who are off location through some kind of projection? Yes, that is possible, and I will we'll talk about that in just a moment. So let me see. Next thing, some considerations when we're talking about how we're going to broadcast our information when we're streaming. So Zoom, I think everybody's kind of defaulted to Zoom. It's pretty interactive. You can have chats, you can have video, you can see everybody's video, you can have breakout rooms. It's pretty popular. I think that most people have learned how to use it. One of the big challenges that we're facing is the streaming limit. The quality, 720p is kind of standard definition television quality. And what that means is that when you're doing things like playing videos, or you've got something like my presentation here with a lot of text on it, there's some challenges, and it doesn't always come through looking great. Zoom is really good for the basics. With very little training, you can get set up and start broadcasting. But to really, when you start bringing in different kinds of audio, when you start bringing in musicians and instruments, there's some kind of advanced tweaks that you have to get to. Facebook Live is pretty popular. We at Elliott Church, we broadcast to Facebook Live. There's no, it's broadcast only. So you can't see the other people who are interacting with that stream. They can make comments and they can comment on the video, but there's no, it's really kind of a one-way communication. Again, pretty ubiquitous. Most people, for better or worse, have Facebook. Again, that same 720p, so that standard definition limitation. Moderation is possible, so you could have somebody, we're going to use the phrase tech deacon, or community moderator or channel moderator. We'll talk about all of those things in a little while, but it's possible to moderate those conversations. You could have somebody on your Facebook page asking questions, soliciting information from the viewers. But realistically, that kind of element of community is pretty gone. And then YouTube, again, very similar to Facebook. It is broadcast only. It is, again, pretty ubiquitous. And the nice thing about YouTube is that you can stream up to 4K, which is ultra high definition television. And moderation, again, possible, and also comments are possible. But YouTube and Facebook Live and some of these other functions are definitely designed to broadcast, not to create a sense of community. So some technical considerations. Here's three very broad types of cameras that we can use. So a basic camcorder. It's probably easy to find somebody in your congregation who has a camcorder that you could use. There's a couple things that you need to know about camcorders in terms of the quality of the video that comes out of them. And I don't want to get into too many specifics there, but you can almost guarantee that a camcorder that's only new to a couple years old will be very easy to use, will give you the kind of quality that you need. Really simple to use. No specialized training. Most of them are pretty simple. Camcorder, like consumer camcorder models are pretty simple. It's a little lower production quality. You can find some 4K camcorders. The one that I got a picture of, this Panasonic, it's about $1,000 camcorder. So probably not what most people are going to buy if you're looking for a less expensive option. The problem is that a camcorder is really designed to take, the way that you'll have it set up is probably on a tripod pointed at the at the pulpit. And so if you want to scan around to pick up different things, then you're looking at having to have somebody operate that. And there's some, it's possible that you'll need an HDMI adapter, but those are pretty easy to find. And again, I don't want to get too far into that. We can talk about those details kind of at the end if somebody has some specific questions. One of the challenges with a camcorder is that the optics that you get are just what's built in. So you're able to zoom in, and the quality of the zoom is really good. Most of them have optical zooms, which means that you won't see a degradation in image quality as you zoom in. But the reality is that there will be some, and you can't switch out your lenses. DSLRs a little bit more expensive, but you have the option of interchanging lenses, which is really really helpful. Very high quality. Most of them have an HDMI out. I'm using my DSLR right now to video this. It is I've got a piece of software that makes it easy, so it's just plugged in as a webcam. It's a Canon camera, but again, it's really designed to, you're probably going to put this on a tripod and have it pointing in one direction or another. And so it is really possible. It's really important to think that if you've got multiple shots that you want, then either somebody's going to have to operate that camera or you're going to need multiple cameras. I just had a quick pop up there about when and why to change lenses. Lenses. So if you want a tight shot, you're going to need a telephoto lens, something, a zoom lens that will zoom in on somebody, a liturgist or the preacher in the pulpit. If you want a shot of the whole congregation, you're going to want kind of a wider angle. This is a pretty tight shot that I have here. What you're seeing, if I put a wide angle lens on this, then you would probably be able to pick up all the junk that is out of the field of view of this camera. It just gives you a little more versatility. So it gives you the ability to use the same internals and kind of change the look that you want, if you want a wider view or a narrower view, if you want to do some kind of interesting optics there. And then the last one that we'll talk about is a pan-tilt zoom, a PTZ camera. You generally mount these somewhere, and they're really high quality. The optics are really high quality. You can't change the lenses, but it becomes kind of unnecessary to have multiples, because what you can do is you can program where the camera tilts and zooms and pans to. So in other words, you could have station 1 is an organist, and station 2 is the choir loft, and 3 is the microphone on the floor, and 4 is the pulpit. And by just pressing the button, the camera will automatically track to those places. They even have some kind of at the $2,000 to $4,000 range that are auto tracking, that will follow a person around, which is pretty exciting, but also a level of technology investment that not everybody might want. There's limited training is required for this, though, because you've got to know how to, control, it's either a joystick or buttons, how to make the settings work, how to, work out some of the details. So just another option. I think that this is probably the most important thing that people need to think about when it comes to their cameras. Most of the time when people say that the quality of their camera is bad, what they really mean is the quality of their lighting is bad. So just for instance, I have a lot of lights in this room, and I could turn on a lot more, but the difference in lighting is really important. If you light your subject well, it's much less important to have a $5,000 camera. And I'll show you a picture in just a minute. But we broadcast from the sanctuary at Elliott a couple months ago, and it would have been nearly impossible without lighting. There is no kind of camera that we could have bought that would have given us a good image, and we spent about, well, we borrowed some lights, but it's about $80 worth of lights that we brought in, that really lit up everybody, the liturgist and Heather, when she was preaching. So if you're having some challenges with camera quality, think about lighting. Quality versus ease of use. So I think that is really the question that you have to ask yourself is, you can have infinitely good quality. So if you have a staff of 8 people and professional, video editors and sound mixers, then you can produce the highest quality worship experience that anybody has ever seen. The reality is that most of us don't have that. And so what you really have to find, and what is different for everybody, is the quality versus the ease of use. So if you have some really technically savvy folks in your congregation that are willing to volunteer, then you can probably ratchet up the quality a little bit and not be a huge burden financially or otherwise, because you have that talent inside your organization. If you don't, if you're having to train people from the ground up, then the reality is that, your quality is probably not going to be, mega church internet sensation quality, but that's okay. What matters is what works for your congregation, for your community of faith. Why is this? Hold on. Why? There we go. So think about that as we're moving forward. And this is the question of kind of how one of those quality versus ease of use things. As people return to the sanctuary, and as people continue to stay at home, if you're just broadcasting to the folks who are not in your building, then the challenge I think you're going to face is that the folks who are not in your building are going to feel like they are watching a church service that they're not participating in. And the people who are sitting in the pews are going to feel like they are the worship service and they don't have any encounters, any connection to the folks who are joining from home as opposed to joining in the building. And so a really simple way to solve that problem is to think about ways to kind of project the folks at home to the people in the building. And this is a really basic overview. So this is saying like, that's a Samsung HD TV. They're on sale now. They're going to be on sale probably through the end of the year and forever. You can probably get one for $600. The GoPro in the middle is $250, and an inexpensive old laptop that you can probably get somebody in your congregation to donate, or you can certainly buy for a couple $100. And you set this up, and you have the camera pointed out towards the congregation, and you have the television screen pointed out towards the congregation. And so they can see the folks at home. The people sitting in the building can see the folks at home, and the folks who are at home can see the congregation view. That's a GoPro 7. It's got a wide angle view. It would probably pick up most of your sanctuary. And at least they wouldn't be able to necessarily make out everybody's face, but it's entirely possible that they would at least feel a little more connected. It's kind of a quick technical overview. Some best practices for worship. And this is things that we're doing now. So this is for virtual church, but it's also looking towards hybrid church as we start thinking about ways to interact. I'll show this picture so anybody who's been to Elliott Church before knows that we normally don't have 6-foot folding tables in the back pew. We normally don't have Cat5 cable, internet cable strewn over the pews. We definitely normally don't have these large lights pointing towards the chancel and the pulpit, but it's what we have right now. When we're actually worshiping in the building again, it's going to look a little different, but there will be lights, and there will be cameras, and there will be a new addition to our sound setup, which is the video setup. And I think this is one of those things that you have to start preparing for. I'm going to say that, if you're the session or the pastor, you need to start preparing yourself for this. This is a significant change. When we go back to the sanctuary, when we're able to safely meet in a building again, it's going to look a little different. It's probably going to look different at the beginning because we're going to be further apart, and we're going to have to change the things that we're used to doing as it becomes safe to be in the same space, but maybe not to shake hands and hug and hold each other's children. But it's going to be significantly different. And if people expect that you're just going to roll back into the building and things are going to go back to normal, you're going to be disappointed. It's going to require some significant investment. And I don't mean money necessarily, although money is certainly a component of it. But it's going to require investments of time, of volunteers, of staffing, of training. And we need to be prepared for that. Things are going to look different. Things are going to look different in your mind now versus what the reality is when you get back. I can't tell you how many ideas we have been through that sounded great, and then when you start implementing the technology, it doesn't work exactly the way you want. So you have to be flexible and acknowledge that things are going to be different. The sanctuary is going to be different. I don't think that we're going to have cables strewn all over the pews, but we are going to have some changes that are going to be noticeable. For some people, that might be large projection screen or large television screens. It could be large projection screens. It could be cameras, recording and broadcasting the congregation. But most importantly, it's going to be okay, right? We'll figure it out, and your congregation will figure it out in the way that is best for your congregation. And that's part of the reason I don't want to get too specific in kind of the overview here. But it's going to be okay. Some things to think about as we're thinking about the best practices. And that is that this is going to require more people to make. There is going to be an entire group of folks who are focused on making hybrid worship happen. And that's going to be in addition to the and ushers and greeters and liturgists and, communion servers and everything else that you need. We're going to need an additional kind of cadre of volunteers to make this happen. One, somebody's got to operate the camera. Like the pastor, if you've been preaching from home and you've been operating your own webcam, you can't do that when we're back in the sanctuary. So we're going to need people to operate cameras. Sound technicians, a lot of people probably already have that, but that job's going to get more complicated. A Zoom manager, and I use that interchangeably, right? But somebody who's going to manage, I'm just going to say Zoom, who's going to admit people, who's going to make sure that people are muted, unmuted at the right times, to make sure that to ask people to change their names so we know who they are, who is mindful of things like Zoom bombing, and who is in charge of the technical side of running the meeting. I mentioned channel managers. So a channel manager is probably, in my view, somebody who's going to be interacting on your Facebook page. So let's say that you decide to broadcast from Zoom to Facebook. I think it's important to have somebody there to answer questions, to solicit, prayers and testimonies, and to make sure that things are moving along there and that people who join you from Facebook feel connected. Tech deacons. So I think of a tech deacon as somebody who's maybe comfortable chatting with people individually, or reaching out and specifically coaching people through some of the technical challenges that they face as they're learning Zoom, as they're learning whatever other technology that you decide to use. So somebody there to help them grow, as technical Christians. And then finally, somebody's got to edit some of this stuff. So right now, for Elliott Church at least, we are recording our entire service, and then we make a couple small edits and we put that on YouTube so that people can go back and view it later. Some of the edits, depend on what you're doing, but it's really straightforward. We're not really editing for quality, we're editing for content. So there might be some things that we're not allowed to rebroadcast. And so, taking those out and being responsible for getting those up online so other people can see them. There's probably other things that I'm missing here. I'm certain there are, but just some idea of some additional work that you're going to need. So things to think about, best practices when you're talking about service, when it gets started. So what I mentioned here is using kind of passcodes or waiting rooms. I think that now Zoom, you have to enable one of those. So you either have to have a passcode or a waiting room for folks. I don't know what your current process is, but Zoom has something called breakout rooms, and you can create a breakout room. And so you can let people into your meeting and automatically shove them into a breakout room. And what that breakout room could be is, hold on a second. Is YouTube always public, or can it be congregationally private? So I had a good question about YouTube, and I'll ask you to bring that up in a second, or if I don't address it. So a breakout room is something that you can use for small groups built into Zoom. But another option would be to create 2 breakout rooms, and one could be a silent reflection room, or a prayer room, and a coffee hour room. And so when people join your meeting, they can choose to go into either of those breakout rooms, so that they're not just sitting around while the Zoom manager and the pastor and the musician are doing their sound checks and making sure that everything is set up. So it encourages some community, and it doesn't assume that everybody wants to just turn on their gallery view and chat with everybody. So that's one of those things that a Zoom manager would be responsible for. So moderating people as they come in, introducing themselves, asking them to change, if they logged in from their iPhone and it just says iPhone 7, encouraging folks to rename themselves so who is there, encouraging them to join one of the breakout rooms, and going from there. So that's kind of the role of the Zoom manager at the beginning of the service. Those tech deacons could be in either of those rooms, either of those breakout rooms, to help people get up to speed with Zoom. We've had we had a couple weeks ago a lot of people who had not been participating in our regular worship joined, and it was great, but it took a lot of work from a lot of different folks to get them more comfortable with Zoom and to coach them through it in different languages. But it was great because we had so many more people joining us. So tech deacons and Zoom managers are people who are going to be managing those smaller communities. And I said, change your name. I probably should have put that first. But it's really important on a couple of different levels. Number one, from the importance of being able to greet people and say, hello, Heather, or hello, John, or hello, whoever, and not hello, iPhone 7, A2, whatever, or just somebody's, some even less descriptive name. But it's also really important for people to do that from a security standpoint, because you will recognize those names, and if you see some strange name that's coming in, or you admit somebody and they're not willing to change their name and you're not engaging with them, then that might be somebody that you need to go ahead and block or communicate with to make sure that they're not there to cause a disruption. Singing, this is a fun one. I don't know what your own experiences are, but there are congregations who think it's really important for everybody to sing together. And we've done that at Elliott, and it is a joyful noise, but it is a noise. It doesn't work that well if you're looking for a harmonious sounding hymn. And so what we've started doing is we have started muting everybody for the hymns. So you can sing your heart out, you can see your friends and other folks singing, but we can't hear anything. All we hear is the audio. Live or recorded tracks while virtual. So my experience, my recommendation is that you record any music, any hymns, any singing, any instruments ahead of time. One of the challenges with Zoom is that Zoom kind of by default modulates and turns down the volume on things like instruments. And so if you record it ahead of time, then you have a little more control over what Zoom does with it, and Zoom is less likely to mute it. And it just takes some of the challenges out while we're virtual. So there's no guarantee that John, who was going to play guitar for you, maybe his internet's a little slow this morning and it's choppy, or he's not feeling good and he doesn't want to play and he doesn't want to turn the video on. So my recommendation is to record this ahead of time. If you're going to do it live, you can there's an original audio setting on Zoom that gives you a lot more flexibility. We can dig into that if somebody's curious. Carl just mentioned it. So it's gotten better, but you have to enable that in order to get the higher quality audio, and it requires some management. And I think an important question is, how do you integrate folks who are singing from home, who are when we move from virtual to hybrid worship, how are we going to find opportunities for people who are at home to participate in our worship? And one of those gifts is sharing their gifts of music. And so I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of talent sitting at home, not in the building. And I would really like for us to think about ways to include them and integrate them into the service. Prayers and testimonials. So I think that there's that we are going to have to change the pace of our worship service to allow for people who are at home and not in the building to contribute their prayers, their testimonials, their concerns. I think that that's why it's important that we start talking about having managers, channel managers, somebody on Facebook, a Zoom manager who can organize that information and take people's prayers and requests and share them with the congregation. I think if you set up a broadcast where the congregation can see the folks at home, then that makes it easier in some ways, but it's going to be much more difficult if you're writing your prayers out, if you're not, speaking your testimonial. It's going to be a little bit harder for that interaction to happen. So we need to be mindful of how to make people feel included. So allowing or disallowing muting, there's a setting in Zoom that allows me to mute everybody and does not allow them to unmute themselves. There's reasons for that. I mean, there's good reasons for that, but it also requires more work. If you're going to not allow people to unmute themselves, then somebody has to be there to collect their prayers, their testimonials. I like the raise your hand feature. So I think that is a really good way to acknowledge people. If you're going to not allow them to be unmuted, they can raise their hand, and then the Zoom manager is going to have to unmute them individually. So it requires a little bit more work. It's not quite as free flowing, and it just requires a little more deliberation, but it's entirely possible. And it's another one of those security steps that may or may not be necessary depending on your environment. I got a couple questions here. Let me see what I got. Okay, so let's see. Oh, higher quality recording. Say more about the Zoom original audio setting. Let me see if I can. So, so I'll say it briefly, and maybe in a minute I'll share it, and we can do it from the screen. Or Carl, you're welcome to unmute yourself. It sounds like you're working on that, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say briefly.
Thanks.
You're correct, Eric, that good to see everyone, that you do need to enable, it used to be called enable original audio, but
right.
At some point in the last couple of months, I think, they've changed that technology. So if you are, if you're a host or co-host of a meeting, if you go to the little caret, the little up arrow next to the mute button, it'll pop up a number of things, the bottom of which is audio settings. And if you go under audio settings now, under microphone, and you could probably, I'm not sure, I think you have to be a no, because I'm just a guest on this. So yeah, if you try that, and try the caret next to the mute button.
Yep.
And you pop that up, highlight audio on the left-hand side, and then under the microphone setting, you'll see now they've got it spelled out really clearly. It says at the bottom of that section, it says select the default noise suppression level low to optimize for music. So right. you can hit that drop, and it's a little more nuanced than it was originally. So that's probably the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, so I just popped that up, and I realized that I'm sharing a PowerPoint, not sharing my whole screen. So there's now four suppressed background noise settings. So one is auto, which is the default. And then there is low, which will clear out faint background noises. There's medium, which will get, tapping. It says computer fan and pen taps. And then high, which will get typing and dog barks. There's also, you can use stereo audio. You can use high fidelity music mode. And there's one that says disable echo cancellation, which is what you use to, so you don't get that feedback loop. That echo cancellation cuts out the feedback loop if somebody's speakers are then feeding back into their microphone. And then if you get into the turn on original sound, I keep that on by default, so that might be contributing there. But it just.
Can you say how that's different from what Carl was just talking about?
Oh, the disable original sound?
Yeah.
Or I mean, show or turn on original sound? Yeah, so basically it removes, hold on, let me just read you from their note. It says it disables noise suppression, removes the high pass filter. So a high pass filter is what picks up spikes if you're talking at a regular tone and then you go up and it gets really loud. High pass filtering kind of levels that out a little bit. Automatic gain control, which is another way of modulating the sound and the volume. It's recommended for playing music and for studio-like environments with higher quality microphone speakers and audio interfaces. Not recommended for use in noisy environments or for general meeting use. So as we're looking towards a future where you're hopefully, let me close this, where you are hopefully back in the sanctuary, you're probably going to have higher quality audio that you can feed into your music, into your meeting. And so that enable original quality just turns off all of kind of the easy settings that Zoom automatically assumes for your meeting. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, we can dig into that a little bit more when I, where does one find the enable original settings button? Okay, so I think I'm just gonna have to change, so I'll show you in just a minute. So I will change my screen share so you're not getting that black square, because right now I'm just sharing this PowerPoint. Oh, that was good. Oh, sorry, preaching. Sorry, let me hit preaching, and then I'll switch up the different way that the sharing settings so we can watch this a little bit better. So number one is spotlighting the video. I don't know if anybody knows that, if anybody does that, but it should not be the most important thing if you have everybody else in the meeting muted. And again, we're talking about Zoom here because that's kind of the default. So but using a spotlight video means that that video, whatever video stream that is, whatever you select as the manager and say spotlight video, or you can even do it as a user, but you can do it for all users if you're the host of the meeting. It allows you to only show that. So it means that if somebody is preaching, then if you spotlight that video, then that is going to be the default. You can do that for more than one person now as the as the host. And so if you 2 weeks ago celebrated communion in English and in Khmer, and so we spotlighted both Heather and Pastor Tisan, and so everybody could see them both presiding over different tables in different places in different languages, but it was possible. And then let me see. So spotlighting the videos, lighting and microphones. So I think that a lot of people are going to have to think about this when we're back in the sanctuary. The pulpit is going to be probably pretty well lit for people sitting in the building, but it's going to be a challenge for these cameras. And so we need to start thinking about how you're going to light the pastor up enough that they are visible to the folks at home and it's not kind of a dark background. One of the things that is pretty important, I think, is some sort of monitor for the pastor so that they can get some visual feedback from the congregation at home. So, you're preaching and you can look out and see if people are nodding off or paying attention in the pews. It's a little harder to do that when people are on Zoom. And I think that it's just a good idea for the pastor to be able to kind of see part of what's going on. So that would be a monitor that is showing what's happening in the Zoom meeting. And you could do that by in a number of different ways. It doesn't have to be a huge monitor, but it would be nice if the pastor could see what's happening. And then I just think that one of the things, again, it gets mixed reviews, but I think that you have to be deliberate about when we've got people who are at home, is that some sort of time for reflection, because you kind of, after the sermon that is, you're a little isolated being at home. And maybe that time for reflection is not immediately after the sermon. Maybe it's like sharing time after the entire service is over. Or maybe you take some time for reflecting on the sermon immediately afterwards. And you can do that virtually. You can do that like now while we're all at home. And you can continue doing that into your hybrid experience. And it's just figuring out how to balance the folks at home and the folks in the building. And you don't have that experience of hearing the person next to you kind of sigh when somebody says something, or those kind of nuances of listening to a sermon, listening to a message in community are lost when we're at home. And so I just think it's important to continue to think about that and think about the best way for your community of faith to make that work. I think that is the last one. So let me see. I am going to switch my sharing. I'm going to stop sharing right now. I'm going to get out of this presentation and close this down. And I am going to ask if anybody has questions. And so if I would love to talk about some specifics here. I'm looking at my chat box now, and I'm going to go through and look at some of these things that I was unable to look at. But chime in either in chat or otherwise.
I wrote down a few questions, and I've got my video on. It's Jim Moore.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. For what we're doing right now, I'm a volunteer with Pastor John Sliders, and I think Ron Wood is on here somewhere. Oh, Ron White, rather, is on here somewhere as well. But, you know, I've been looking at this for a while, but not so much from the aspect of the interaction from people at home. Mm-hmm. Basically, I'm thinking our next step, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, plus we do have limitations for volunteers. I just turned 70 years old, and I'm the tech guy in the back with the sound booth and the slide stuff. So
sounds like it's working.
Oh, well, maybe. But I'm looking at what will it look like to have a live stream video of the Sunday service. Mm-hmm. And then with the Zoom and the interchange from people at home at a later time. So that's where I was looking at when we first started this, but I have a number of questions here. You're talking about using YouTube or Facebook Live. What restrictions or problems do you have if you're trying to broadcast live music being performed with those two? That's one of my questions.
Sure. So I'll go one at a time. CCLI and One License both have streaming licenses that you can buy. They're add-on. They're not particularly expensive. I don't know if somebody wants to chime in with what they cost.
I think they're about $250 a year each.
Yeah, and so I think that's definitely a reasonable expense for the past 9 months when we've been at home. And that covers any broadcasting. So that's those licenses, a streaming license or whatever it is, those aren't like platform specific. So you don't have to, I saw a conversation somewhere that was like, well, what if we want to stream on Facebook and YouTube? And you're not buying a license for Facebook and a license for YouTube. It's all streaming. And the same thing with Zoom.
This is assuming you perform the music. If you're buying pre-recorded music that another artist has performed, you're in a whole other level of copyright.
We have the license for streaming. We have the license for projection. We have the license for sharing audio, sharing between the this is the group.
So you would be covered then.
Well, we're not right now. We're not. We use another streaming service. We don't use Facebook, Vimeo, or But do those? So, but the license, how does that prevent? I've heard there's protocols, or what's the not protocol? I can't think of the word, but basically where if YouTube recognizes something, then that would come down. Or something that's streamed, but I don't know about live stream.
So every Sunday I have to file a response to YouTube flagging our videos for copyright violations. And you just file a dispute. And the only thing that they're going to do is what YouTube actually has an arrangement with all of these publishers. And basically you can choose when they flag your content for a copyright violation. You've got basically 3 options. One is called, like, they demonetize the video, so they won't show any ads against it, or if they show ads, you won't make any money. Not a problem for any of us. Number 2, the option is to mute that part. So YouTube will automatically just drop the audio from your video across that, 2 minutes or whatever that you're playing to him. The third option is you can dispute the copyright flag, and I do that every time. And you basically just respond to them and say, you have to answer a bunch of questions, and then you enter your licensing information, your CCLI or your One License number. It's inexact. So there's sometimes that, let me see. So there are times that there's some music that is, available under multiple different names and copyrights, and it'll get flagged for the, Portuguese version of something. and we file our copyright dispute and they say, sorry, you don't have a license for this Portuguese version of this thing, which is ridiculous, but it is what it is. And at that point you just say, okay, fine, drop the music out of it, or, you know, demonetize my video.
There's no real time.
To the best of our knowledge, so we do not broadcast on YouTube.
Okay.
So we only use Facebook. But to the best of our knowledge, there is no real-time copyright
Actions.
That could be changing, I guess. You know, that's today's information. Actually, that's probably the last time I looked at YouTube about that question, which has probably been a couple months ago. So it could be different now, Jim.
Okay. I love the picture that you had of your setup there in the sanctuary, and I see you have the switcher and the monitor and the computer.
Yes.
I just bought a PTZ.
Yep.
Okay, and a mirrorless camera, but we don't have operators, so that's why I'm thinking PTZ.
Yeah.
Are you using a multi-camera?
So in the sanctuary right now, we are not, because the only time that we have gone to the sanctuary is, so Heather was there preaching and we had a liturgist. And so we only had to have them in one place.
Okay.
So we put the PTZ on a tripod in the middle of the sanctuary, pointed right at the floor mic. When we go back, and we have, say, our music minister is there and playing the piano, and there might be a soloist, what we're going to do is use the PTZ settings to say, here's position 1, here's position 2, here's position 3, and we're going to hope that that works. We'll probably run into a case where that doesn't work perfectly and we need to come up with a multi-cam view. And the other thing, oh yeah, Heather just put in, that when we do return, we'll have a congregation cam too. And so we'll probably want to have that included in the switcher. But right now we're hoping for one broadcast camera for the, you know, for the service, for the pastor, preacher, liturgist, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And I just have 2 more here. Is now I can't. I'm having a senior moment.
Maybe only one more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carl, thanks, and bye, Eleanor. Sorry, we got some folks departing.
We for again, this is in sanctuary. We have off to the side of the pulpit, we have a stage with a screen where we project the lyrics that are being sung by our praise team.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's full verse. It's not, you know, it's not like a line and a line and a line, because we have issues with people being able to follow what's going on. Do you have any experience with integrating something like a ProPresenter with an OBS or something like that?
So we haven't done it yet, because in our congregation, you know, in our experience right now, we're not broadcasting that.
Right.
So if you use ProPresenter so just what Jim's talking about is there's a software program called OBS, Open Broadcast Studio, and it allows you to kind of mix in all of your cameras and a bunch of other stuff before you send it out as a feed, as a video feed.
Right.
And so it is possible to take something like ProPresenter, and OBS will pick up ProPresenter as an input, and you can even do it as an overlay. So you could, so ProPresenter it brings text onto your screen. And so you can create an overlay in OBS. So like if I wanted to put like an overlay like right here, I can set that up in OBS. Sorry, I'm mirrored on the image. You know, I can put something over. So I'm trying to back up a trailer, which I'm not really good at. So you can put, you can use ProPresenter through OBS to overlay right here. That's one of those really specific settings, though.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But yes, it is entirely possible to do that. It's entirely possible to throw text up over the whole thing. So you could fade me out and drop text in front of me. you know, another thing that we've, with some of these switchers, like the
I
ATEM.
think he's asking though, Eric, about how to project it in the sanctuary and on Zoom at the
Right,
same time.
and on Zoom at the same time, and maybe
Oh.
have a
Yeah.
screen here at a bottom third broadcast.
So let me see, how would you do that? So
Is it possible? I don't care how, you know.
Yeah. So, so for instance, if you had, so like our ATEM Mini has an output. So you could, if you ran it from OBS into a switcher, you could take the output and feed the output to the projector. You could also probably pretty easily, if you're using the main computer, feed. Let me think about this. So ProPresenter you could run in a screen. I think that you could have multiple outputs for ProPresenter. One that goes to your projector, and one that goes into OBS. Because OBS is just going to pick up whatever you feed it. Like it's not going to take the whole stream and like prevent it from going somewhere else. But that's like a little more. I'm a visual learner, and so we'd have to talk about how to like actually look at what you're doing there. And see what works, but it's entirely possible. And, you know, alternatively, you could feed from OBS out to your camera out, which is broadcasting to everybody else. And then you could just have that out going into your projector too. So that would be maybe the simplest way, is just kind of switching over to basically the home view when you did that.
I don't live too far from Lowell. Maybe I can make a mast.
Oh, well, I was going to say in return, you know, we could probably head up your way, as the case may be.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope that wasn't too far off over some people's heads.
Oh,
a year ago, I wouldn't have known what I was talking about right there.
I wouldn't have known that a month ago, but I do have a mirrorless camera that I bought also. The only problem that I have trying to use it is I can pan with it, but if I try to zoom with it, it uses the computer, and then through OBS, it uses it as a camera monitor. So all the automatic focusing stuff shows up.
You see all of that. What kind of camera is it?
It's a Panasonic. Yeah, it's an expensive one, but it doesn't.
Well, so there's a couple of options.
It goes away after 15 seconds, but as you're actively zooming, all that stuff shows up.
There is a way to create a clean HDMI out, and that might be so what I will do is I've got a page with a bunch of resource recommendations. I'll just make sure I'm going to make myself a note to put that HDMI converter, which will basically take your signal from that mirrorless and strip everything out, so you don't get any of that. So
and I'm saying this for anybody else that might be looking at cameras too.
And what you're to get to the top part of that problem, you want to look for a camera that has what's called a clean HDMI out, which means that and some of them don't have that, so it's fine. But that basically takes all of that erroneous, you know, autofocus bars and, you know, histograms and all of that stuff, and cuts it out and only gives you the video stream. And it's called clean HDMI out. I'm actually not using that for my camera right now, but I can. And this is a 15-year-old Canon, and they make just a little USB stick basically that you plug your camera into, and it strips all of that out. What else? What other questions do we have?
So Eric, this is Beth. And
hey, Beth.
Can we go back to your discussion on music?
Sure.
And you were talking about the audio settings and the 4 audio settings.
Right.
The automatic, the low, medium, high.
Yes.
Where do you find those?
So are you at your you're at a computer right now, right?
I am.
So on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little caret, like a little up arrow beside your sound button.
Beside my mute button?
Yeah, beside the mute button.
Okay, there you go. I got it.
And so you click on that, and then at the very bottom it says audio settings. I'm looking at this. I'm walking through this as I'm doing it. So so it says audio settings. Do you see that?
I got it. I hit it.
Click on that, and then there's a couple of options. If you kind of scroll towards the bottom, So you should see suppress background noise. Do you see that?
Well, I think maybe I don't because I'm not a host, because all I see.
Okay, and let me
So you
see.
hit audio and then you would,
Hold on a second.
I'm sorry if I'm taking.
Oh, that's quite all right. So let me, no, I'm just trying to,
Beth, you should be able to see it not as a host. I can see it. I'm not a host.
Okay, where are you looking then?
So you're hitting that caret, and then the bottom choice is audio settings.
It's also possible that, Beth, it is also possible
So
that,
the big screen that you've put on,
yes.
okay, that's where I am, and then I don't know where to,
Okay, so this is what you see when you first get there.
yeah.
And then you can scroll down and below
okay.
your
Oh,
test
I
mic,
see, I didn't scroll down.
it says suppress background noise.
Got it.
And then you've got these three here. It's also possible if you are not seeing that, if you're somebody else and you're not seeing that, that could be because you don't have the most up-to-date version of the Zoom, software. And so you just need to make sure that you have that set. So then you'll see suppress background noise. These are the four options. Show in-meeting option to turn on original sound. And then here's a couple of options in terms of when original sound is enabled. You've got these options here in echo cancellation, which I was talking about, high fidelity music mode, and use the stereo audio.
If someone's playing into the computer, you suggest they disable the.
Yeah. So if you've got somebody who's at home, playing a guitar, let's say, I would encourage to allow original audio because it's just going to take, it's like Zoom audio is designed. We have to remember that Zoom is designed for meetings, and we are asking Zoom as churches, as people who are, doing lots of different things. We're asking Zoom to do some things that it's not inherently designed to do. Zoom is designed to have a great experience where nobody's dog barks in the background and you can't hear me typing over here. And so it's a good thing that Zoom has enabled this original audio. So basically, original audio is taking the training wheels off of the sound and saying, I'm better at managing this. I know what I'm doing. So let me do this. And so I would encourage you to do that when you're talking about, somebody singing from home, somebody, playing a keyboard, playing a guitar, whatever it is. The other thing, if that's going to be a thing that you do a lot of, your congregation does, I would really recommend getting a better microphone. Question just came in. Everyone can set their own audio settings. Can the host set it all? You can disable original audio, I believe, as a host. I have it enabled here, so that's why you guys can all change it. But the original audio setting is really only for somebody who's going to be, playing some music, singing, whatever it is. So it's one of those things that you might want to just have a conversation with your musicians about. But the point that I was going to make is that if you're going to make a habit out of people, contributing music from home, I think that you should probably look at investing in a better microphone. So I'm using, where am I? This is a Yeti Blue mic. It's about $100 mic, $150 mic. It's pretty high quality. You can't always tell that because of Zoom. I bought a microphone the other day for Heather to use downstairs. So I'm upstairs producing all of our worship. Heather's downstairs at our table. You can see her too. And I bought a $35 microphone on Amazon. It's like you basically, Megan says they spent $42. We spent $35. It came with a mic stand that clamps to the side of a table. And it's got really good audio. I mean, you're not going to confuse it for a studio mic. If you're a professional, you're not going to be like, oh my God, this is the best. It's really, really solid. And it makes such a difference when you're trying to record things like, or when you're trying to broadcast somebody on a guitar or playing a ukulele or whatever it is. Other questions? Oh, sorry, Alan or Beth, anything else?
Oh,
Juliet's been like waving her arm around.
Oh.
I don't know if you can't see her. I just
can't,
wanted
because
to.
but hold on. Let me switch.
No,
my-
I just unmuted myself.
Oh.
I'm Beth's musician.
Oh,
These
wonderful.
are the things we have been doing since pretty early on, and some things I've tried to do with other organizations and the problems I've run into. Okay, so I have the church's synthesizer on my desk, and I
Oh.
play the prelude live.
Wow. Okay.
Regularly, the soloist and I meet at the church with a technician, and we record hymns and some of her solos. And those have those been working well, Beth? I think they have.
I
Put you on the
think they
spot.
have.
So,
the
but
right
here are some of the anomalies I've run into when we've tried to do something else.
Okay.
Okay, number one, I have a lot of lighting problems, as you can probably see, and I had difficulty joining a Zoom choir that her son set up, but I think that's solved.
Okay.
I made a couple of soundtracks, not recordings, but soundtracks using a music writing program called Finale,
Okay.
and emailed them to our soloist.
Okay.
The first one she played back, it didn't sound too good because she was using her phone rather than her computer. And before we could try this again, the software I was using, I think it was Windows 10, changed all the sounds in the sound bank, and I had an empty sound bank, and it took me a while to figure out what I had to download to fix that. That's been fixed, I think, but we haven't used it since then. Number three, I was attempting to participate in a fundraising concert, and I made a Finale file of the accompaniment and then sang to it. You can't hear the accompaniment. And I don't know how to access my own computer speaker to make a Zoom file. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that again, but it would be good to have the answer in case.
Yeah. Okay. So one at a time. Lost files in Finale is, I'm sad to say, not something that I can speak to off the top of my head.
No, just the fact that I wanted to use the playback on my computer while I sang.
Right. So
to make the Zoom, to make the virtual choir.
The challenge with that is that if you so there's a setting in, hold on, let me see, where am I going? Okay, I don't know if I can, so in your share screen settings, there is an option for let me see, under advanced. So if you click on the share screen option, there is an option to share only music or computer sound. And so so that is an option if you're just playing a track back that's on your computer and you want other people to hear it. So you, and there's a setting at the bottom of that button that says share sound. So hold on a second, let me, so this
I think I ran into something like that, but evidently not the right one, or it didn't work.
Let me see. This is about to, oh, is it going to let me do it? Oh, I don't think so. So unfortunately, I can't share my screen and show you the share screen at the same time. So what you need to look for, and you can do this in Zoom Help or, Google it, is to, on your share screen settings, there's an option, there's a button at the bottom, a checkbox that says share sound. And so that's what you need to do. So if you're just playing a file on your computer and you're not sharing the sound, it's not going to work because it's the only music that you're going to hear is a very faint bit that your microphone picks up. And
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Yeah. So you need to make sure that you share the sound. I think, kind of the bigger question is like the synthesizer that you have have like XLR outputs, like mic outputs on the back. How does the audio come out of it?
The church's synthesizer that I play?
Yeah.
I don't think we're having any problems with that.
Oh, okay. So that works just fine. Okay.
That seems to work okay.
Okay. So I think that your problem is probably, I think that you should look into, at least, I'm not going to say that I think it's your problem, is the share computer sound option, which would then allow you to broadcast what's playing on your computer.
I did click that, but evidently there were some subsets I needed to click as well.
Yeah, so
I think from what you're saying.
So it's at the very bottom. There's 2 check marks. One says share sound and one says optimize for video sharing.
All right, thank you.
And just remember that everybody here is learning as we go along. So like that you have a synthesizer at your desk at home, I think says a lot about your commitment. And so picking up the last couple of technical bits, probably not the hardest part. I can share sound. I don't know how to play a synthesizer, so you're better than that.
I play organ, piano, harpsichord too.
Don't keep volunteering. Beth's right next door. She's probably gonna like sign you up and have a harpsichord.
No, she wanted me to record everything. I said, it's Easter. Let me play live. Let me play live.
Well,
and then and that means I'm in place if we want to have a total chaos happy birthday at the last minute.
And we've done it too.
Yes.
So great. Well, thank you, Juliet. Okay, what else? Anything? We've got plenty of time from my standpoint.
I want to ask the folks from Wyndham. I heard that you guys are not using Zoom. You're using something else to broadcast to. I'm wondering what you're using, how it's working, and is it interactive the same way Zoom is interactive?
Yeah, Heather, we're using a live stream channel that I actually was granted access to from a guy that lives behind me who owns a live stream company.
Oh, wow.
And so we have our own private channel. It is not interactive. That's the one drawback of it. But we have our musicians sending tracks out during the week to people who are singing. They get mixed up, sent to me, and then I broadcast them out on, and we're using OBS to make that happen at this point.
Okay.
And our challenge is to try to figure out how do we do this in an interactive way? And then in addition to that is how do we get set for hybrid? Because when that comes, we still want to do the live stream, especially for our homebound members. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we are at this point.
Yeah, so that's why we have chosen to go with Zoom despite its limitations, because we really want people to be able to see each other. And
right.
We have, our service has always had a lot of sharing. We have a time for people to share testimonies. We have, we receive prayer requests during the service. So we felt like if we didn't use something interactive like Zoom, we would lose all of that. And that would be too much loss for us.
Right.
I think that, so at a higher level, if you didn't, John, I don't know if somebody from, I'm sure somebody from your church, I don't know if you or who else, the Altar Live presentation.
Yeah, I was not able to be on that.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think that in some ways that's a problem looking for a solution looking for a problem. Mm-hmm. But I also think that what you're describing might be one of the very narrow use cases where it really makes a lot of sense. So it is possible, and I don't want to like get into it because I don't work for Altar Live and I don't know all of the ins and outs. But it is possible to bring a third-party stream in to Altar Live. Mm-hmm. And what they've basically built is a skin on top of Zoom or whatever else, wherever you're bringing your live stream in, that allows that interaction, that allows you to have breakout rooms. Some parts of it looked a little clunky. I'll be honest, like they can watch this video and they'll hear me say it. I'm not going to pull that punch. It's a great concept. I think for a church that's struggling with getting Zoom working plus something else, Altar Live is just way too much, you know. You guys might be in that kind of what I perceive as a pretty narrow space that might be well served by Altar Live, because you've got that third-party stream. You can bring that in, and then this basically skins the top of it so that you can have interaction, you can have texting. I think that from a like concept idea, they're great. They let you like have neighbors in the pews. So like I could have Ron on this side and Larry on this side, and like, bam, I could chat with them. You can put people at tables. You could have a like new member table where people get to interact. So I would encourage you, I think that it's on the Presbyteries website.
It is.
Look back at that. And I think you can just go get a 30-day trial or something like that. It might really work for you guys when you're talking about that. I think it still doesn't totally solve the problem. I'm sorry, I should say, I think it might work very well while we're virtual. I think when you go back to in-person or hybrid, people in the building, people at home, I wasn't seeing exactly how it solves all of those problems. I wasn't seeing how
seemed like, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
If there's anybody I interrupt a lot,
my
it's
life.
my husband. I think the way they expect people to use, if you're using Alter Live, that they expect people in the pews to also have their phones out so they can interact with the people at home.
Yeah.
So that is like not the best, but let's be honest, people in the pews have their phones out anyway.
Yeah.
And at least this way they're interacting with church instead of like doing the crossword puzzle or scrolling, Instagram.
Yeah. I can only hear a sermon so many times. And sometimes I have to, sorry, that was a joke. I don't.
There's a quick technical question in the chat, Eric, that you can probably answer about how to share sound on Zoom without sharing your screen.
Oh yeah, Paul. So Paul is saying in this that they share sound in Zoom. They have a document showing. There's actually so if you click on the so you bring up that share screen. Hold on, let me just do it. You won't be able to see it. You bring up the share screen, and there's 3 tabs across the top. One's basic, one's advanced, and one says files. And so by default, it defaults to basic. And so if you click on advanced, you get 4 other options. I'm sorry. You can bring in PowerPoint as a virtual background, a portion of the screen, which allows you to just like draw a box around a particular thing that you want to show. But then there's a 3rd box that says music or computer sound only. And so what that does is that allows you to only share it. It won't share your screen. I think it just goes black.
No, you keep the video. So
it keeps.
I took a dance class and my dance teacher did this. So I could see her dancing, but I heard the music she was playing.
Okay. That's right. So it shows whatever the video is that is your main feed, but it doesn't show, but it doesn't have to show a video screen. So if you were using one camera, your camera was pointed at the pastor, and you started sharing the audio, then they would see whatever was on the camera, but the audio would be broadcast over it. For us, when we are sharing audio, either the only time that we're sharing audio without text on the screen is during the offertory. I mean, without the lyrics on the screen is during the offertory. And that's when we have our screen up that says, here's, go to this website or text this number to donate. But it's entirely possible to do that. Or if you wanted to bring in, if you had a picture that you wanted to show, there's lots of different options, but in general, if you just want to, in general, there's a way to do things in Zoom. It's just not the default setting. It's like the audio, like we can figure out how to do it, but it's not going to be the easy one, because the easy one is set for a meeting, a bunch of people sitting around talking like we are, not producing a church service. I say that I'm trying to be in a good mood. I sent a mean email to Zoom earlier today about another problem. And so I'm trying to be nice in spite of my frustration with them. So, Megan, unmuted. Anything down there? Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Just great. Just always one more. I feel like we just freaking learned this, and now we have to like hybrid. Okay. Anyway.
You don't have to.
This is just a question, I think mostly for virtual, but what I feel like we really can't replicate is the like 30 people are in a room together, but I go over and pull Claudia aside and have a side conversation with her. And like the chat, I've been chatting with Heather a little bit, for example. And you can kind of do that, but
directed not to everyone, right?
yeah. But Is there any platform out there where people, like every participant could create their own breakout room and invite someone to, like, is there any kind of, is that a thing anywhere?
So was somebody, Thomas was raising his hand. We'll let the.
Yeah, that's what Alter Live will do for you. That's their one killer feature.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I don't know, Thomas, do you know exactly how it works? Are you guys using it, or have you?
I've only seen their presentation. I tried to create a free account so I could dive in there and look at it and look at their production capabilities.
Yeah.
And the only thing it would let me do in the free feature was log off.
I mean, so I have to admit that I'm really impressed with what they've done in about 7 months. Like they basically hatched this idea, like, you know, at the end of March, like 2 weeks into the pandemic, because they saw a need for it and they're really struggling. So I was going to say, I was hoping that somebody had some live experience working with Alter Live, but that is a possibility to have like communications, but they call them tables there, I think. Is that,
Yeah, it's kind of like self-entered breakout rooms, and they use the paradigm of a table.
Yeah.
And
so
you as the host can define how many people are allowed at a table.
Right.
And once that number has been reached, that's it. You can't have any more people join the conversation. But the conversation is private at that table.
Right. But compared to Zoom with breakout rooms where I can create enough breakout rooms to put 2 people in there, but then I'd have to assign them. Right. I think the value prop for Alter Live is that you can say, all right, Thomas and Larry and Beth and Heather, let's go hang out and talk about this thing. And so yes, so it exists. And there's probably other things that do that in some way, but they're not built in the same way that Alter Live has it as kind of a fundamental thing. Like I'm sure that there's some service where I can start a private chat room and just send you a link and say, Megan, come hang out here. But that would be off the Zoom platform. And so I think that's one of the benefits of Alter Live.
Can I just share one quick story also with you guys talking about hybrid church? One of my members is a middle school teacher, and they've been remote, hybrid, remote, hybrid, all whatever. But she's a deacon. I was in the deacons meeting and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys know it's hybrid church that we have to figure out. And she said, what if we treated hybrid church like hybrid school? And we thought about prioritizing the people who are most affected by this pandemic, who are most at need of contact, of spiritual foundation, of whatever, as the people who first get priority to get back in. And I thought that was so nice, because I feel like there's kind of this the people who are healthy, the people who get the vaccine, that's who will let in first. But I liked that way of thinking about the people who gather in person first are the people most in need.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we kind of default to that, right? Like the idea that, as soon as we'll go back, the people who are least at risk can come back into the sanctuary. And I think the reality is that the people who are least at risk are probably also best able to adapt to what we're doing here.
There are lots of ways to be at risk now too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Thanks, Megan. Anybody else? Okay. Well,
I just want to say, as sort of an example of how a tech deacon can work, I've been fielding a few questions in the chat and trying to answer some questions that are to everybody that I know the answer to, but also then some people have started to just direct message me. And I think that's because I'm your wife and I'm, half of the Elliott team on this thing. So I just think it's a really great example. If you have somebody who you can say at the beginning of your service or all during the service, if you have a question, send a chat to Heather. Or if I see a question dropped in the chat and I know that Eric's in the middle of presenting and I can answer it real quick, if I'm sort of elected to be the tech deacon for that day, appointed, let's be honest, voluntold. If I'm assigned to be the tech deacon for this Sunday, then I know to watch the chat and try to help. So that, even in this meeting, I have just sort of christened myself in that role. But I think it helps.
It does. And you know, and if you changed your name to Tech Deacon Heather, then that's what people would see. You know, that would be, you know, and so you could say, you know, you could make your name like asterisk Tech Deacon, so you're the first person there, and then you click you from the drop down and shoot a chat over.
Right. Or you could make me a co-host, I guess would be the other way to keep me near.
Yeah, then you'd be right at the top. Yeah, but well, so
Eric,
yeah.
are you going to put up a list of resources?
Yeah, so I have one that I will send out. So that's part of the reason I got
And
here.
could you include on it the type of mic you just bought, Heather?
Yes.
Thanks.
So yeah, Megan, if you have a recommendation, or if you like have the invoice from what you guys bought, it might be the same thing, or really close to it. There for a while, for the first 3 months of the pandemic, you couldn't buy a webcam or a microphone or anything else. I mean, the price, I almost sold this thing because like the price had tripled on eBay. And I was like, I bought that thing like 10 years ago. And anyway, I didn't. But yeah, so I'm going to send a link to my website that has all of this stuff, so it doesn't look like it gets trapped in Never Land. That's why I got all of your emails when you registered. So I'll send this out to you, and I'll probably get. All right, thank you. And so I'll send that out sometime later today with the link to everything that we've talked about, including the Go Mic compact clip-on USB mic from Sweetwater. Thanks, Megan. Anything else? All right. If you have any questions, you can respond to the email that I send out. That's my real email address. I don't have anybody else to check it. So, and John, I'd love to hear from the Wyndham Church. Like when you guys, you know, if you guys move and do something with Altar Live, I think it would just be awesome to hear about that as you learn more. So I appreciate it. Good luck.
Keep in touch.
Merry Christmas. Enjoy the rest.